Well, hello, great to see you here, and good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, depending on where you are on our wonderful planet. And we are live from a very, very sunny London. It's odd, but it's true. It's happening live from London. Very much a very warm welcome to our live stream today. This is a truly global live stream today because we've also got somebody very special in South Africa, and we've got someone very special in Australia on the late shift. So I look forward to introducing our guests in a moment. If this is the first time that you've joined one of our live streams, welcome to our live stream. We run these sessions sporadically, monthly, on lots of different topics. And the goal of these live streams are to try and bring you as much value as possible for you personally, for your teams, for your organizations, and for the people that your organizations ultimately serve. And to do that, we like to focus on the super practical things that can make an impact for you. If this is not the first time you've joined one of our live streams, then thank you very, very much for being here again. My name is Wayne Clarke, and I'm the CEO of World Class Manager. We work with now over 250,000 managers in more than 1,000 organizations in more than 50 countries around the world. And what we like to try and do as much as we can during this time is to try and feedback and share some of the insights, tools, data, best practices that we're picking up from working with some truly exceptional leaders and managers in lots and lots of public sector, private sector, third sector organizations all around the planet. So if that sounds like a good plan, we're going to get to it. Let us know where you are. Give us a shout out. Give us where your name is, what organization you work for, what country you're in, what town you're in. Shout out. Put a shout out on the screen. Let us know where you're at. And this is genuinely live. This is not a recorded, edited podcast. Hello to Richard here, also live from London. Things do happen on this. They can go wrong, they can go right, and things do happen a bit left field, but that is the value of being live. And the reason why we want to do these live is because they are unscripted, they are unedited, and we get to you some clean, fresh insights from some exceptional leaders. And we've got two very, very exceptional leaders that I'm looking forward to introducing in a brief moment. We've got Pierre here from Zurich. We've got someone here from the US. Ryan, you are up early in Michigan in the US. Thank you very, very much for being here. So we're going to kick off a very short 15-second intro, and then I very much look forward to welcoming our two very, very special guests live to the screen. Well, we like to say, the more that these goes on, the bigger the intros get. It was a big intro. It's a big intro. So I'm very excited to have Stef du Plessis here with us, also here live from South Africa. And we've got Steve Simpson here from Australia. This is wonderful because this is a truly global live stream. We've got people dialing in from all over. We've got Laurie here from the US. We've got someone here from North Carolina. We've got Kajia here from Pakistan. This is awesome. So we like to share with you some super practical insights, best practices, tools, and tips. And we're delighted to have two very, very special guests. So I'm going to hand over for a moment for a brief interview and also for a very quick intro into who our two expert guests are for this session, where we're going to be talking about world-class cultures. I don't want to say too much because we're going to get into this in detail, but maybe I could ask for a quick intro from you, Steve Simpson, live here from Australia. How are you doing?
Thanks, Mark. It's a real treat to be with you. Look, a quick background to my work career. I was originally a teacher. At age 25, I travelled to Canada from Australia to do a master's degree and came back to Australia and went into head office of the education department. I was a public servant for 5 years. During that time, I was invited to facilitate a conversation for school leaders around various topics. Now, I'm in my late 20s at that stage, feeling bulletproof. Without looking at the topics, I said, yes, I can do that. And one of the sessions was titled Culture. I went back to my books that I'd studied on culture and thought to myself, I cannot present this back to these school leaders. And that was the prompt for me to create the concept of UGRs, which we're going to be talking about today a lot, which we think actually provides a completely new insight into workplace cultures. 25 years ago, I met Stef du Plessis, my business partner from South Africa, and we've developed this concept of UGRs tremendously since that time. So that's it in a nutshell. Wayne?
Brilliant. Thank you very, very much, Steve. And Stef du Plessis, I've been saying your name not as eloquent as Steve said it, but Stef du Plessis. Here he is. He's live. He's from Johannesburg. Tell us a bit about you, Steve. Stef?
Hey, Wayne. Hello, everyone from all over the world. Briefly, I fell onto a stage behind a microphone by accident 35 years ago. Got heard there at a sales summit. Got heard there by a guy who then put me on the world's biggest sales meeting in the US, where I spoke to people from 70 countries. It was the second time I ever delivered a presentation. And then for a brief while, I was a motivational speaker. And then I figured out that there is more to this. Focus on two things: employee engagement and workplace culture. And then, as Steve said, we met 25 years ago, and it was just like this. And since then, been working with organizations, helping them to ramp up employee engagement and to boost the way that people do things using the UGRs concept. That's us, Steve and me, in a nutshell.
Love it. And we're going to get into this in detail with the UGRs. And I was also fascinated about this the more that I heard about it and learned about it from you both. Obviously in our work, we've had the opportunity to peer into, more than 1,000 organizations, and you definitely get a read of culture very quickly. Our focus and our bias is very much looking at the world through the eyes of the manager. And as we know, I think, and you will testify in your work, the culture is dictated and built or destroyed by the quality of the manager and the way that the manager interacts with the team. So I'm looking forward to getting into some of our questions related to that. Obviously, we're very biased, but we think that this has got a huge angle on what you're talking about. And the reason why UGRs piqued my interest when we first spoke was because I've never heard it defined in this way. And the work that you've both done with so many organizations around the world, thousands of leaders, and worked with so many different teams, I think is hugely valuable, which is why I think we've had such interest in the live stream for today. So Steve, if I could kick off with the first question to you, which is in terms of the business case here, because lots of people talk about culture, it's quite ethereal. How do you get hold of it? Is it real? Does it make a big impact in terms of business performance? All organizations said they want to change or improve the culture. I don't think many really know what they mean by that, and it's quite hard to get their hands on it. But what is the business case for culture? Why would you invest your energy, time, and money in such a pursuit?
It's a great question, Wayne. And to be honest, Stef and I did some research a while back, and to be honest, we stumbled on this question, which each of us now, whenever we get the chance, put this question to leadership teams. The question we asked in our research was this: if the culture of your workplace was to become as good as it realistically could, how much improvement would there be on people's performance/productivity? Now, in our research, we gave people a sliding scale. It started at 0. 0 is a legitimate answer. You might think the culture now realistically is as good as it's going to get. And then we gave a sliding scale: 0, 10, 20, up to 100, and then 100% plus. Wayne, in our research, 91%, 9 out of 10 senior leaders said there would be a 20% or more improvement in performance if the culture was to become as good as it realistically could. Incredibly, 58%, 6 out of 10 middle managers said there would be a 50% increase in performance and productivity. When we do this face-to-face, it's not uncommon for the average to be at around 40%. So for us, that's the business case for culture. There is a direct relationship between culture and performance and productivity if we get the culture right. So it's a very strong business case in my view.
Really strong. Yeah, please, Stef.
A quick add in there on that, Wayne. A while back, I got to be in a room with 50 or so CEOs that belonged to a leadership forum, and we'd spent a day doing UGRs. And prior to that, we had actually surveyed their UGRs in their organization, so they got to see the results of all 50 of these organizations. Long story short, at the start of the conversation, I asked this question to the audience, these 50 CEOs: if the culture could realistically improve, what percentage improvement would there be in productivity and performance? And the stats in that room were the same. The CEOs almost all said around 20%. And then we spent the day helping them understand what UGRs are and how culture really works. And at the end of the day, I asked those same CEOs the same question, and their response then was somewhere between 50 and 85% improvement they could get if they could realistically improve culture. Now, if you want a business case, there's a business case.
So I love the word you just used, Stef, here with realistically, which I think tees up another question here, another thought on this one, which is then like how to, because this seems so obvious, doesn't it? If someone said to you, invest your money over here and you're going to make 20, 30, 40, 50% return. You'd be like, yeah, where do I sign up? Take my money. So, if this is such a sure thing and so right, then why don't more people get this right? Why don't more people go down this track?
Well, in my view, I think there's a few reasons. One is that people don't understand the business case. It's only when we bring to the surface, people are able to connect the dots between culture and bottom line performance. The other contributing factor, I think, Wayne, is that people intuitively know the culture could be better, but really don't know what to do about making it better. Yeah. So that's why we're spending probably too much time mentioning the acronym of UGRs without explaining what it is, because UGRs gives people meaning and language to really tackle the culture in a meaningful way and practical way.
So could you break down for us UGRs? For anyone just tuned in, we've got Stef du Plessis here and we've got Steve Simpson from respectively South Africa and also Australia. And in terms of this concept and the acronym UGRs, could you break it down? What is it?
Let me pick this one up quickly. So UGRs, unwritten ground rules, is the concept that Steve fell on, I don't know, Steve, 30, 35 years ago before we partnered. And UGRs is unwritten ground rules. By definition, people's perception of this is the way we do things around here. So they sound like this. Around here, the only time I get spoken to by my boss is when I do something wrong. Or they sound like this. Around here, we talk about teamwork, but when the pressure is on, we point fingers. They could sound like this. Around here, our funniest jokes are normally about work colleagues. Now, these are not on posters and published. These are unwritten, the way that people behave. So what happens is a new employee, say, joins a new organization, and they go on induction and they learn the policies, rules, and procedures. And then they go to their first meeting. And they get to see whether the meeting starts and ends on time or not. And now there's a UGR about timekeeping. They get to hear what we say about colleagues when they're not in the room. Yeah. And now there's a UGR about respect and how we treat one another. And at the end of the meeting, they see how everyone smiles and nods when the leader of the meeting says, so can I count on everyone here to implement? And everyone smiles and nods. And then as they walk out the door, behind the hand or at the coffee machine, they're telling everyone all of the reasons why it's never going to work. And now they know all about accountability. Yeah. And the truth is, what they learned on induction goes out the window, and they behave because they want to fit in somewhere in between what gets recognized and what gets frowned upon. And the UGRs dictate behavior, dictate performance, drive results. So you asked, why aren't organizations doing this then? Well, they are. Every organization that Steve and I ever engage with have in one way or another tried, and we're talking really big global organizations here. They've tried in one way or another to address culture, but they didn't get it down to a level where people really get it, where they understand it, and where they can link individual behavior to organizational outputs and performance. And UGRs creates that dialogue and helps people to understand that.
And that's the thing, I guess, whether you like it or not, you've got UGRs, but maybe you've not got the ones that you really want and the ones that are helping you to achieve what you want, right?
Everywhere and all the time.
Yeah, very much. One of my experiences sort of consistently over the years, so I spent a big chunk of my career feeding back staff engagement feedback to CEOs and leadership teams about how the staff felt about the organization. In some organizations, you'd give the feedback and you'd have this wonderful discussion with the leadership team, and then nothing would happen, right, over the next year. So I'd go back in. So, and in some cases, I did this 5 years in a row, where it got embarrassing to the point where I sort of felt, at the end, why bother doing this every year? Save yourself the energy, the time and the money, and the hassle of putting people through this survey. Because one of the questions often in many surveys was, do you think anything will change as a result of filling out this survey? I mean, it's a real kick in the teeth when sort of 60% say absolutely not, nothing's going to change. But then what we realized was, if you talk to your average, let's just pick on a CFO or a CEO and say, right, is this important? Is this important to change this stuff? And they're like, absolutely, it's important. Culture is our number one focus. It's really key for us. And then you say, okay, well, over the next 60 to 90 days, just talk me through what you're going to do in order to make a difference, in order for people to change their opinion from being, I think this place sucks, to I really like this place. Like, what are you going to actually do? Because to get someone to change their opinion on anything is really hard, let alone an ingrained feeling of emotion connected to how it feels to be at work. And then often what I would realize is there was nothing really there. They said, well, we're going to talk about this every month at board meetings. So I bet you are, but I'm sure nothing's going to change for your average person on the street. And I think often a lot of leadership teams, I'd be fascinated in your views on this, is that they feel that because they talk about this a lot, something's magically happening somewhere, but actually nothing is. And then they're shocked when they get feedback from staff surveys which say it still sucks. So I'm just interested, like, how do you accomplish that? You work with so many leadership team members and CEOs and CFOs and C-suite leaders. How do you get them to translate that good emotion and feeling into something that actually feels tangible? For me, I'm the most junior guy in the company.
Well, Wayne, I think I think you're painting a picture where there are potentially good intentions, but again, leaders don't know in practical terms how to address this. And that's part of the power of UGRs. It gives us language and structure to really tackle the culture within an organisation. And your example to do with surveys, there are UGRs to do with surveys. And it often is as you described, and that is, around here, we have a survey every year, nothing happens, so why bother to treat it seriously? So there's a question that we will often ask leadership teams, and it's this. Because this is necessary for culture change to occur. This is one of the 3 principles for culture change actually to occur. And the question we ask leaders is this: if we went to your people, leaders, and you leaders are not in the room, how would your people answer this question? What are your leaders' top 3 priorities? A little while back, I was working with a board of a major health region in Australia, and the chairman of the board held up the strategic plan and said, Steve, that's easy. Here are the priorities listed on the strategic plan. I said, no, that's not what I'm asking. If I went to your people, how would they answer that question? Because if people don't naturally say people or values or culture or a synonym of those words, then it's not a top 3 priority. And frankly, culture change isn't going to happen as much as it could potentially happen. It's got to be a top 3 priority.
Mm. And where does that sit then in terms of it being a top 3 priority amongst all the leaders you've worked with? I'm just interested, like, how many say it's a priority and actually treat it as a priority in terms of their behavior matches what they say?
Well, that's essential, isn't it? It's actually essential that behaviors match. So people deduce this. So one time I'm out with a leadership team, and we're out at a social dinner after working with their people during the day. The HR director, just in casual conversations, says to the team, by the way, I spoke with Gary. He's an outsider who's about to join the executive team. I spoke with Gary last week, and just from the questions he asked, I know he's going to be terrific. I say, Rachel, as the HR director, you have just said something that's profound. And we worked on this later on because we came to the realisation that it's the questions that you ask and don't ask, which in large part help people deduce what your top 3 priorities are. So in large part, it's what you say, but it's also in large part the questions that you ask.
It's a great point, isn't it? I mean, it's even like the basis of a decent conversation. There's actually a parent at one of my children's schools, and he's a fascinating guy because when I meet him, he has no questions. All he has is statements, and it's really difficult to engage with him. I sort of stand next to him every single time, and I'm thinking, oh no, I hope he's not watching this. But yeah, it's a difficult guy to engage with, but you get a sense of the level of interest is 0. So it's really hard to engage. And you get that feeling sometimes with leaders in organizations, don't you? Like, they're not asking any questions. They don't know much about people. They kind of assume a whole bunch of stuff and then get bitten. And we see this organizationally, you sort of get the classic stories. We had one here of Toys R Us with the big toy store. Apparently people were telling Toys R Us for ages, for like years apparently, that they should run slime stations in Toys R Us because slime was such a big thing, but no one's listening. No one's asking any good questions of what trends are changing, and therefore they're surprised when the business falls apart, right? So yeah, I think business imperative goes, hand in hand with what you're saying in terms of the culture of leaders, and also plays out the culture of the organizations. So Stef, I'm interested in your thoughts on this one in terms of like what's the leader's role in all of this? So and that might not necessarily be just the CEO, but people who are in a leadership role. What's their job here when it comes to improving, changing culture?
we're talking leaders at different levels here. So let's start at the very top and talk executive quickly. And I'm going to point back at Steve here for a sec. Steve, run us quickly through the 3 key ingredients for senior leaders to get culture shift happening in their organizations. Go, Steve.
So this is based on a question that the CEO of McLaren Automotive, who Stef and I worked with, asked us one time when we were in the UK working with the senior leadership team. He said to us, what are the ingredients? What is it that characterises companies that are genuinely able to transform their cultures? That was a tricky and challenging question for us, but we came back and said to them in response to this, we think we're about to disappoint you in our response, because we think that what you're asking for is strategies and tactics that characterise companies that are genuinely able to transform their cultures. And we don't want to give you that, because what will work in one company might not work in another. So we rather provided 3 principles that characterise companies that are genuinely able to transform their cultures. And they are these. It must be a top 3 priority of the leadership team. That's one I've already mentioned. Secondly, this is not a project. There is a real risk that people see this as a major project, which is the responsibility and the sole responsibility of a particular group. This is more about the minute by minute, hour by hour, day by day way in which we conduct ourselves as leaders. The third principle is shared ownership. And if there's a silver bullet for culture change, and there isn't, but if there was, we would put our money on this one. Unless there is shared ownership of this, then there is limited capacity for transformation. And we truly believe, well, here's a principle that we truly believe in. We believe that the vast majority of people want to be part of a positive, productive, dynamic, hardworking team. But you know what? Many people have given up. And if we give people exposure to the UGRs concept, it resonates with them, they get it very easily. They start to understand how their personal behaviours contribute to the prevailing UGRs. And we can get teams genuinely excited about the prospects and genuinely have shared ownership of the culture, which doesn't happen too often, but I tell you what, it's really exciting to be part of.
Wow. And this is
I want to pick up, Wayne, can I pick up on one level, one thing at a lower level, the middle tier of management, what they can do. And then I just want to close the loop back to the top quickly, to the senior teams. Sure. Leaders across the board of middle management need to really get that how they show up causes or allows the UGRs that are in place to remain in place. So Wayne, a few minutes ago, you made the point, there are UGRs on teams everywhere. UGRs don't just start to exist when Steve and I go around and introduce the concept. By the time we get there, there are UGRs in play, but they are never spoken about openly. And the link between them and performance and outputs is not obvious to people. All we do is point out the obvious here. So how leaders at every level engage, how they show up and how they own this journey. So an organization I'm working with right now, a large telecoms organization, the CEO is a new appointment and is absolutely committed and driven that we are going to shift the culture. Leaders at middle level want to go on this journey, but there's a vacuum. Not all of the senior leaders at exco level are demonstrating the behaviors. And unless that changes, nothing will change. And then one last thing, how we hold people accountable for their behavior. So leaders at middle management need to be clear on what the tolerable behaviors are so that we can shift the negative UGRs and create more positive ones. And then we have to hold people accountable for behaving in certain ways so that there comes a time when it is no longer okay to demonstrate certain behaviors.
Yeah.
Timeliness, delivery, doing what you said you were going to do, and that the tolerance for poor performance at that level gets addressed and gets addressed directly. And there you have a broad, your question was, what do leaders do? Well, that's what leaders do.
So can we get into another level of this and picking up on your point, Steve, around the shared ownership? Because I think this is a really important point to try and unpack a little bit more. I think certainly for my own benefit, and I'm sure for everyone else who's dialed in. One of the things I often see is you've got a leadership team who have got, let's talk about a new strategy. Let's say they've defined and developed a new strategy. They love it. The leadership team has spent a couple of days working on it somewhere very nice. They high-five each other and think that it's fantastic. What I often find is the further you go away from that group of people by geographical distance and by grade in any organization, the murkier that excitement gets, to the point where it doesn't even exist at all. They often think that lots of other people feel that. And I was always interested, like, why is it that those people feel more inclined and more excited about that vision than any other people? Often it's got to do with a few things from what I observe. One is that there is this definite shared ownership because they created the thing in the first place, which I think is quite a clue for many different organizations. And then the other thing is the incentive, is that the incentive for achieving that thing is intrinsic, inherent in their debate and conversation and emotional connection to it. Then what they try and do is communicate that thing through a number of failed mechanisms, because you can't broadcast message that. You're not going to get someone to get as excited as they were about the process, purely because you've missed out the creation process. So I wonder whether, when it comes to driving shared ownership across, it could be a team of 100, could be a team of 10,000. How do you, it's the $1 million question in my mind, how do you get that level of shared ownership to the point where people own it and feel like this is there? And then second question, I guess, in this is, what incentive needs to be there to get people to own it? Because it's not like they're sitting there with loads of empty space in their diary thinking, if I could just spend some more time on this organizational vision, that would feel really fulfilling. Like, I've got stuff to do and I've got that trade-off to make. So yeah, shared ownership, how do you drive it? And how do you create a sense of incentive as well for people?
Okay,
Steve, I think this is step 1 and 2 of the 5 steps, but you give whatever context you want and try, build that in, or I'll pick up at the end.
Yeah, and I think for the sake of people who may have joined us late, we should explain that UGR stands for unwritten ground rules, people's perceptions of this is the way we do things around here. And by the way, a person who is new to a company, doesn't matter how senior they are, when they start, will normally be quieter than they otherwise would. Why? Because at an unconscious level, they're tuning into the unwritten ground rules. Why? So that they can conform. They hold enormous power over us. So what we can actually tap into and find what the UGRs are. We can surface the prevailing UGRs by getting people to complete the sentence. And this is based on world-first research undertaken with 2 Australian universities, where we got people to complete the sentence anonymously to, for example, around here, customers are. So Wayne, the stuff we got back from that, we had 5 companies involved in the initial research. It was unbelievable, gobsmacking. We had people write, customers are a pain in the neck and worse. One person wrote, around here, customers are an interruption to my working day. I'm not kidding, they literally wrote that. Now, each of these companies had wonderful documentation proclaiming their commitment to customer service. What a load of rubbish if they're the prevailing UGRs. So each company has, or when I say each, most companies have a statement of their aspirational culture, normally articulated through the value statement. So they might be respect, constant improvement. If you don't have a statement of your aspirational culture, our recommendation is you better do it quickly. In this vastly changing world we're in, we need to be very crystal clear and committed to our aspirational culture. We can then find out what the unwritten ground rules are in relation to that. So if we have a value of innovation, how would your people complete this sentence? Around here, when someone comes up with a new idea. If we have an aspirational cultural attribute of respect, how would your people complete this sentence? Around here, people are treated. So this is what we do. We can surface the UGRs and we can share the outcomes with everyone in the business. This is a long way, Wayne, of saying we can get shared ownership by being transparent with the outcomes of the UGRs stock take, we call it, not a survey, we call it a stock take. Teach them about the concept of UGRs and getting them excited for the prospects for the future. The vast majority of people who are unhappy in the workplace do not want it to be that way. We just got to give them an opportunity to get involved in this and contribute in more positive ways. It's an exciting prospect. Stef, what have I left out?
And before that, Wayne, can I go?
Yeah, please.
So if we are assessing the current culture through this UGR stock take conversation, and then analyzing those results, not just by looking at the tick boxes of are those responses positive, negative, or neutral, but actually looking at the comments that people made, the words they used, and the frequency with which themes come up. Now we can determine what are the underlying themes, what are leaders doing that is causing or allowing the current UGRs to exist and to prevail. What can leaders do about it? What is the impact of it on our business? And what can we do to improve it across 3 domains? What can leaders do to change? What must all individuals do to shift the UGRs? And what must we do in terms of structure, process, system? The systems recommendations. And these are not made by Steve and I, these are made by people analyzing the results. And Wayne, through that dialogue, and in our client organizations, people at every level participate in that conversation. And shared ownership comes from experiencing what can be done about it and the benefit of actually doing so. Now, if we follow that journey, we end up with a map of what needs to be done as an operational procedure, as a system to drive the culture, so that if we assessed it again, somewhere down the road, we would see a shift. And we have clients who have been running this over years now. A client of Steve's, formerly a client of Steve's, came out in Australia. I think they ran this for 10, 11 years, tracking the stock take regularly and then referring back and seeing what they can tweak. Final word on shared ownership. Prior to assessing what the current UGRs are, have a conversation with people about the envisioned state of their culture, not just the value statements, which frankly, Wayne, most people in most organizations don't even know what they are, let alone behave at an intentional level driven by the values. That doesn't happen. So what we can do is have a conversation with people about what they wish it to be, then frame the questions for the stock take to speak directly to that and assess where we stand on this envisioned state, and then nudge ourselves towards it over time through shared ownership and people owning it. Wayne, back at you.
It reminded me, it was a surreal moment. It was hilarious inside. I didn't laugh out, but it was a bank that we were working with, and one of their values was working together. And it's like written on glass. It's beautifully etched on this big wall of glass. And I'm sitting here, and there's 2 leaders here arguing, being really nasty to each other. And then behind them in glass etched is working together. I thought, this is beautiful. If I could just take a picture of this, this is fantastic.
Yes, a better one, Wayne. Steve and I worked with a globally leading bank, big name, top 3 bank globally. We worked with them in 26 countries, integrating their values. And one of the values was stewardship. And if you ask any mid-level manager at any level, what does stewardship even mean? Most people can't even articulate what that looks like in leader behavior on a day-to-day basis. There's a disconnect. So you want shared ownership? Close that disconnect. Make this real and let people feel connected with where it is we want to take them.
And then can I go back to something that you said, Steve, about I think it's really important. But when you go into an organization, and I can definitely, the different organizations I've worked in over the years, you do get that quiet moment at the beginning. You're absolutely right, where you are tuning into, whether you're conscious or not about it, what's going on here, so you can figure out how best to do that. And it makes me think, actually, I was thinking as you were saying about this probation period, and even thinking about, I've never really until this moment thought about the actual word. Probation's horrific, isn't it? Because like, you're on probation means you just got out of jail, and if you screw up, you're back in jail. I mean, it's like such a purgatory word to use. But you think of this moment, whether it's probation or the first 90 days, 100 days or something, you think, how important is that in this whole process and act of creating the right type of culture? Because one of the other organizations that we work very closely with, they're also a big bank. I would argue they lose the majority of their people who tell us that they would sign out in the first 3 months because they're attracted by the brand because it's really attractive, and repelled by the culture. And, the individuals in that act are the managers and so on, as we often know. But yeah, I'm interested, how important is that probation first 100 days? And have you got any examples, or could you talk through like how you would approach changing that if an organization isn't getting it right?
Well, I mean, that's part of the beauty, I think, of UGRs is it raises all of this to a level of consciousness where people are thinking and talking about, well, how can we genuinely welcome new people into the fold? So this, by the way, this is a human condition, not a work condition. UGRs exist whenever we get human beings together. So any new group we're confronted with will normally stay quiet. But Wayne, I learned something only in the past 6 months or so, additional to what we've learned over the past 30 years or so. I joined Rotary. We moved to a country location in Australia, and I joined Rotary. And I think most people will know it's a service organisation, voluntary, wonderful group of people. I'm very glad I joined it. And there was a new woman who joined our group of around 40 people. And I'm ashamed to say this, I almost instantly did not like her. Why do you think that was the case? She was new and she spoke too much. She defied the UGR, which says when you're new, you stay quiet. So it works in both directions. So we naturally stay quiet to find out what the UGRs are in order that we can conform. But that then becomes an expectation on the people within the organisation that they expect the new person to stay quiet. It's remarkable when you think about it.
Mm. And what is it? I'm interested in terms of again, both your views on this one. Like when you see it, you know it. Like in all the organisations you've gone into, I'm sure you've seen some challenging things and difficult things, and you've also come across teams and organisations who are getting it absolutely right. You know, when you think about X company or X team, you know, if everyone in the world could just be like them a bit more, then the world would be a great place. And what is it that you see when it comes to like the characteristics of teams or organizations that sort of tend to genuinely transform or have improved their culture? What do you see?
Oh, well, you know, great cultures are very easily defined, Wayne. We way overcomplicate this. A great culture is where there is alignment between the aspirational culture and the UGRs. It's simple. An ordinary culture is where there is misalignment between the aspirational culture and the UGRs. So the task for leaders is always about bridging the gap. Now, we will never get it completely aligned, but we know, because we've lived this, we know that once that movement happens, it becomes almost unstoppable because people get excited for the prospects and genuinely get involved in it. Now, does that mean there's no disagreements? And yeah, of course not. We want disagreements, but the difference is those disagreements are dealt with appropriately. So it's not everyone's happy and it's not la-la land. It is, you know, still focusing on what matters and collectively fighting for stuff, but doing so in an appropriate way. And you can feel the movement. You can feel the excitement.
Wayne, a quick question for you. Wayne, a quick question for you. Is that allowed? I mean, you've got the big mic.
That was a question.
Okay, cool. Here's the question, Wayne. If you were to sit and observe people in a workspace, let's make it clinical. It's an experiment. You're looking through a one-way mirror. You cannot hear what they are saying, but you can see what people in a work area of 100 people are doing. Could you, after a short while of observation, tell apart those who are committed to the brand, passionate about their jobs, enthusiastic about their work? Do you think, not with 100% clarity, but do you think you can observe and notice some of those people?
Sometimes.
Through what?
Sometimes I'll say that. Yeah, it's how their body language is, how they look with each other, how they interact.
It's not sometimes then, Wayne.
There are also some people that are tremendously introverted that might not show something.
Cool.
Yeah.
So now let's add a layer and now say there is a soundtrack as well. And let's say that you are in the organization and you are a recipient of their responses to work and outputs of their work. Now, can you tell? Yeah, by the frequency with which someone replies, by how they speak to people, by how they walk, by how they sit, not by how loud they are in a meeting. Oh, we should keep an eye on the timing. I was with an exco the other day and there was one quiet guy and the others were not just verbose, but they spoke their minds. And in this environment, they had built a culture where where you say what needs to be said, and it is a great place to work because everything is out in the open. And the quieter guy on the exco isn't out because his personality is different. He speaks when he needs to, but when you can see people being committed to and engaged. So your question was, how do we know if people are living this? When you walk into an organization, and whether they're scrolling while you wait at reception or making eye contact, where you can tell when people are connected to their values, and you can tell whether they are serious about representing the brand. And if we get to a level where there is that shared level of ownership, that people are committed to representing the brand and living their aspirational state, when it's an obvious state. You see it, you feel it. And the opposite is true. When it is absent, you see and feel that as well.
Yeah, very true. Can I ask another question? As I'm asking the question, for everyone connected in, whether you're connected in through LinkedIn, web stream, YouTube, Facebook, however you're here, however you got here, thank you for being here. We'd love to get your questions and your thoughts. And I know some of you have been tremendously generous at sharing some of your thoughts as we've been going through this, which we've probably not had a chance to react to because we've been deep in conversation here, which is great. So if you've got any questions, please do feel free to submit them on whatever chat function you have access to. We've got the guys in our team who are going to pick up on those questions and display them on the screen as we get into it. So please feel free. Quite final question from me on this one. And again, back to what I was saying at the beginning with my bias here of looking at the role of the manager, is what is the role of the manager in all of this? Because the manager often feels that they're not the creators ultimately of organizational visions. I'm sort of subjected to what the leadership team members want me to think about, say, and how they would probably prefer me to act based on values that have been developed elsewhere. So I've got to inherit these things and sort of somehow adopt them, live them. I've got challenges in my team. I've got a tremendous workload as well. You know, I'm in quite a difficult position. You know, what's the manager's role in all of this? If you could wave the magic wand with the managers in mind, what would you want to see?
Steve.
Oh, thanks, Stef. Leave the hard one for me. Thanks very much.
It's the UGR.
Look, I don't want to oversimplify this, but I think the leader's role is to try and live the values and to hold people to account to those values. So most leaders become leaders through their operational expertise. They are good operators. And now we're adding another dimension because now they are people leaders. So I think they need to focus on their people. They need to try as much as possible to live the values, to be transparent, to own their flaws. I think most people are forgiving if people demonstrate flaws but are seen to be trying. Yeah, look, that's as good as I can give, I think.
So I'm going to help Steve out here. Steve, can I help you out?
I think I need it, Stef. I really do.
Okay. Wayne, we need to also, in addition to what Steve has just said, we need to systematize the achievement of our cultural aspiration. So we don't just talk about what the values are and what the UGRs would be. And by the way, one of the steps in a longer journey is to frame the aspirational positive UGRs that would be visible if we were living our envisioned culture. To frame the aspirational positive UGRs that would be visible if we were living our aspirational state. With other words, if we were living, back to that example that we had earlier of that value called stewardship, if we frame that in terms of aspirational positive UGRs, what would that look like? It would look like around here, if somebody needs help, we really lean in and help them. Around here, if somebody makes a mistake, we turn it into a learning opportunity. Around here, if someone is uncertain, they can raise their hand and ask. Yeah. Those are the behaviors that leaders need to demonstrate, and we need to articulate them. So one of the things that leaders need to do is show up with consciousness that how they behave allows or enables the UGRs that exist, number one. Number two, do you remember earlier we spoke about analyzing the result of the stock take? That's the current snapshot of the UGRs. and then surfacing recommendations for improvement. Well, those recommendations now become operational. And now we hold the delivery of that, we hold leaders to account. And here's a big one, clarity and consequence, that we are crystal on how we behave and that there is consequence if you don't behave that way. And Steve and I are not talking about always just reprimand and correction. We're talking about training, enablement, coaching. And when that's in place, people start to get it, that together we can make this better. And then a last one, the fact that most organizations hold leaders to account for performance. There are KPIs and there are standards and there are quotas and but we don't really hold people to account for behavior. And there needs to be equilibrium here. There needs to come a time in the organizations where we work, some of them adopt a system where leaders initially and later everyone become equally held to account for the delivery of the number of widgets that they make, example, and for how they go about behaving while they are producing the widgets. And when all of that is in place over time, then it becomes co-owned, shared, and leaders drive it. And now somebody on their probation period doesn't even need to go to induction. They just need to be on the job for 3 days, and they get to see what the standard is. And because they want to fit in, now they comply. Steve, did I help you out there?
Thank you. I'm glad you're here.
Well, we've got, I think, quite a few questions. I'm going to read out. So we see the same questions that everyone else sees at the same time. I'm going to read this out, not because I don't think you can read, but because we've got people that are probably just listening in, so might not see the screen. So question to both, what role do you think clearly written ground rules and behavioral expectations play in successful culture change? In many organizations, culture transformation efforts involve formally defining desired behaviors, practices, and ways of working in order to shift the underlying unwritten ground rules, UGRs, but how effective do you think that approach is in actually changing day-to-day culture? Question from Elena. What a great question. Thank you, Elena.
I'm dying to go on this, but Steve can have first dibs if he wants it.
You're on a roll, Stef. You might as well keep going.
Double down, baby, double down.
It's not all that often, so yeah, we go. It was Elena, right?
Yes.
Okay, Elena, great question. Here's a trick question. So we have this envisioned state, how we want it to be, maybe underpinned by our values. And now we get people on board and we want to achieve this thing. And now we produce what I suggested, a set of aspirational positive UGRs. Oh, and Wayne, some of our clients end up putting their aspirational positive UGRs on billboards. One next to the biggest highway intersection in Johannesburg, the affirmation of how they behave. Now we have these written aspirational positive UGRs. And now they are no longer unwritten ground rules. I mean, they're on a billboard. So now they're these prescribed behaviors. Well, only until we manifest them. And when people are living them, a little bit like the All Black rugby team who clean their own change rooms after a match. After a while, it becomes lived, and then it becomes perpetual, and then the culture becomes bigger than the leader. This is important.
Yeah.
Because if the leader is the total influence of a culture, replace that leader and everything changes. And we want the culture to permeate the extent to which it becomes the standard. Mm-hmm. So, Elena, the written behaviors, if we get people to connect them back to our values and our envisioned state, if they understand why they are necessary, if at some point those behaviors become lived, then the need for this dictated style of leadership evaporates. I hope that helps. Steve, help me out if I didn't do that well.
Let's move to the next one. It's a great response, Steph. Brilliant. And we've got some great questions, so let's keep it flowing. So a question here from William Cherry. Do you think there has been a general erosion in most work cultures post-COVID? in brackets, realignment of personal priorities? And how much harder do you think it is to reverse that erosion for businesses who remain fully committed to highly flexible stroke remote working models? Wow, great question, William. Thank you very much.
So, William, it is a great question, and you're about to find out that I give the short version where Stef gives the longer version. Yes, it's harder, without doubt.
There you go. There you go.
It is absolutely harder, and my argument, no, our argument, is that that makes this even more important. We worked with a global, you would know the brand name, technology company. Their who interacted via computer screens, and their UGR was cameras off. For goodness sake, can you believe it? Cameras off. You might as well talk to a brick wall. So it makes it so much more difficult when we've got a mix of people working from home, when expectations about work-life balance have shifted. There's no doubt about that. And that makes this work even more important. We can get to a point where we distinguish ourselves through having a brilliant culture, and there are so few that are able to do that, that is such a brilliant point of difference for any company. But it is difficult. It is a challenge.
Yeah.
Quick apology to William. William, I'm sorry that Steve didn't live up to his promise of giving the short answer. Sorry for that.
We apologize, Mr. Cherry. Right, so question from Ale Frolova. From your experience, what approaches are most effective in engaging senior leaders or directors who are most distant from day-to-day culture in our organization? And how can we encourage their ownership of the culture in the organization? As OD partner, I've managed to successfully engage middle managers, but really struggling to get the senior leadership team on board. Awesome.
Can I go? I spent a day in a room. I spent a day in a room yesterday with a large organization with their HODs, and there were 85 or so of these HODs in a room having this exact conversation. Here is Steve and my message to excos, not in a aggressive, not in an assertive, not in a. Here is our message to them. If the CEO does not own this journey, it will fail. If the exco are not visible and seen supporters, it will fail. If senior leaders do not buy in and make it visible, they are, I have a chirp around this, they are wasting their money and our time. We need to close that gap. And Allah, you were 100% right. If that gap exists, the intervention to change culture will fail. The job is to get senior leadership on board and to own it and not dictate it, but to share it. And then finally, it doesn't stop at the middle managers or the senior managers. We need to get all employees on the journey. And in organizations with thousands or tens of thousands of people, that's not always possible. But I think we understand what I'm saying here, that if we get people at all levels in the conversation, something changes.
Yeah, absolutely.
Can I quickly add on to that? Because it is a good question. The business case is necessary. Leaders don't need to understand the business case for culture, hence our first question that we shared with you. The second thing is it's not always possible to get the entire organisation involved. We can get portions of the organisation committed to that. Now, that has more difficulties, of course, but we can see movement in portions of the organisations where there are leaders who want to move on it. And making this fun and interesting is the other thing.
And through champions, Wayne, Allah, by enabling champions, which is something that we typically do, we get people who take the dialogue into the broader organization and so on. Wayne, back at you.
Great. No, I think we've got time for one last question. And question here from Michelle Herbert. Many of our ways of work are unwritten and passed on through people. When leadership changes regularly, what helps ensure those shared expectations and ownership don't get lost? What a brilliant question, Michelle. Thank you very, very much. And I think, a live current case, isn't there, is this change of guard at Apple, which has got so much global attention, from moving from Tim Cook to this new chap who's, been lauded as this hardware guy. He's not an AI guy. How do you maintain that momentum with the shift of leadership? Brilliant question. Thank you again, Michelle.
I'm going to impress everyone with my short take here, and Steve can wrap it up after that if he wants. A short while ago, I said, if we get the culture to be bigger than individual leaders, the culture will take on a life of its own. And individual leaders will fit in with that culture and become a part of it. And that's what we want to do here. If the culture is owned across the enterprise, then it will permeate and exist into the future, and change at senior leadership will not have a negative impact on the culture if it is strong enough, typically. Steve.
I'm going to talk the reverse as well, because there's this thing called legacy UGRs. Last year, I had the most difficult presentations I've ever had in my entire career. It was with the workers of an underground coal mine here in Australia. I had them for 2 hours, and I was able to win them over. But I learned that they told me that contractors who worked side by side with these workers were regarded as second-class citizens. That's not the words they used, but that's what they told me. And I said, why? And they said, well, in the 1980s, there were strikes, and these contractors were the ones who came in and did our work. I don't know if it's a common term, but in English, it's often referred to as scabs.
That's right.
So I say to them, so this is a legacy UGR from 40 years ago. So people can hang on to the negatives, and apparently for more than 40 years, which is a dangerous place to be.
Yeah. Well, I think we're going to end it there because we're out of time. There are some more questions. What we try and do as much as we can is answer any other questions. We'll answer those on the various different platforms that people have connected in from. I want to send a huge thank you both to Michelle, to Elena, to William, and to Ala. I think that was everyone who asked questions that we were able to show in the time. So huge thank you for your questions. A huge thank you to everyone connecting in and dialing in. We've had so many great reactions as we've been going through the stream. It's brilliant. And I'm not even going to attempt to try and summarize what Stef and Steve have talked through, but I think safe to say that, as you can see, their depth of work, their breadth of work around the world is truly exceptional. They've worked in every shape and type of organization. If you click and QR code the World Class Cultures code, which is on the screen, it will take you to some of the work that Steve and Stef are doing, and you can learn more about them and also to connect with them through on LinkedIn. Steve and Stef, a huge thank you for being part of today, being so unbelievably generous with your knowledge and your insights. And maybe if we can ask you back again in a couple of months to share with us some more, because I feel like we've only got to a portion of what you guys have covered. And I'd love to drill in more into the UGRs as we can perhaps do in another session. But a huge thank you. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Wayne. It's been a treat.
Awesome. So live from Australia, live from Joburg, live from London. It's been an absolute pleasure being with you today. As we said, we like to share these sessions on a regular basis. So we'll look forward to sharing with you more info on the next session, which will be coming up soon. And we look forward to seeing you in another session. Thank you again for being here, and see you again. Bye-bye.